Greetings Exiles, Lexu here with my Frostbolt Comet Stormweaver Sorceress build for Path of Exile 2. This build excels at clearing maps by killing enemies at range, even blasting them from off screen for an extremely safe playstyle. The one button build spams Frostbolts that split into multiple projectiles and explode to shotgun groups of enemies. If enemies somehow manage to survive Frostbolt explosions, Comets are automatically triggered to deal massive area damage. For bosses, a clever interaction with Frost Wall triggers more Comets and provides additional shotgun explosions. Even pinnacle bosses at maximum difficulty don't last more than a couple seconds. This endgame guide is recommended to get started with maps after finishing the campaign, due to Snakepit being required for the fork shotgun tech. Although Snakepit is a very cheap unique ring that costs about 10 exalted orbs, so you can obtain it for earlier leveling. If you're leveling without Snakepit, a Frostbolt and Cold Snap setup can carry you through the campaign. I'll make a leveling guide for the Cold Snap build later on, so subscribe for future content. In this video, I'll be covering everything you need to know for the Frostbolt Comet Sorceress. Coming up first are the build mechanics so you can understand how it functions. Then learn how to play the build in the skill rotation. Finally, the entire build setup is covered in the sections for skill gems, passive tree, and gear. Stay tuned until the end of the video for more gameplay footage. Before I show you the entire build setup, let's go over the build mechanics for the Frostbolt Comet Sorceress, starting with the fork shotgun. Frostbolt by default always pierces, but the projectile damage is a bit low. Individual enemies can only receive this damage once per cast, even when multiple projectiles are provided by sources like Scattershot support. Frostbolt's explosion on the other hand deals 50% more damage and can shotgun an enemy to hit them multiple times. The problem is Frostbolt only normally explodes when hitting terrain due to the projectiles always piercing through enemies. Snakepit is the solution that enables the build, since it removes pierce from spell projectiles. When equipped in the left ring slot, Frostbolt will fork, splitting into two the first time it hits an enemy. The splitting effect is further enhanced by nodes in the passive skill tree. Split shot and forking projectiles provide a 100% chance for an additional projectile when forking, allowing each projectile to split into 3. Frostbolt projectiles will fork into 3 on the first enemy hit, and then explode on the next enemy. These explosions can overlap to shotgun enemies with multiple hits if they're close enough. With Scattershot support to fire 3 projectiles per cast, and then each projectile splitting into 3, enemies can be hit by up to 9 explosions. Another advantage gained from the split is an extended range to the Frostbolt projectiles, allowing them to hit enemies multiple screens away. My Sorceress build utilizes a high critical hit chance to trigger cast-on critical Comets. With at least 50% crit chance on Frostbolt, Ambush support guarantees crits on the first hit against each enemy. I've seen a common misconception from players thinking Ambush guarantees a crit by itself without needing to stack additional crit chance. Crit chance modifiers apply as percentages based on each skill's base crit chance. Frostbolt starts with a base 12% and needs 317% increased critical hit chance to reach 50%. Then Ambush grants a more modifier, which means it applies as a separate multiplier to double the 50% to 100%. Frostbolt's guaranteed crit on the first hit against each enemy rapidly triggers cast-on critical Comets. Excluding Ambush, the critical hit chance of Comet is higher than Frostbolt due to the base crit on each spell. Frostbolt has a base of 12%, while Comet has a base of 13%, increased to 15% with gem quality. This allows Comet to scale better with the increased critical hit chance stacked in the build. To further enhance the high crit chance, Maligaro's Virtuosity is equipped to set your critical damage bonus to 300%. Crit damage starts at plus 100% by default, so these unique gloves provide a massive 200% additional crit damage. The downside is all other sources of increased critical damage bonus won't have an effect, but crit stealing 4 times damage is amazing for such little investment. The Frostbolt and Comet setups easily clear groups of enemies while mapping, But you might be wondering how the build fights against a single target. Frostwall is the tech utilized against bosses for multiple benefits. First of all, the Frostbolt projectiles split and explode upon hitting frost walls to allow a single target to be shotgunned by them. Then the frost walls explode to contribute a significant amount of damage output. The frost walls are also supported to apply larger shocks and exposure to increase all damage dealt. Finally, the guaranteed crits from Frostbolt hitting frost wall rapidly triggers cast on critical comets. This skill combo can instantly delete tier 15 map bosses. Even max difficulty pinnacle bosses don't survive the barrage of icy explosions for long. Hey Exiles, I have an important update for the build. While I was getting ready to release this video, GGG snuck in a nerf to the Frost Wall tech. Crits made against the Frost Wall no longer generate energy for triggers. The good news is the build still works just fine. There's enough explosions already critting the boss to generate energy, and mana remains as the bottleneck. Now that you hopefully understand the build mechanics, I'll break down the skill rotation for the Frostbolt Comet Sorceress. The build has a one-button playstyle for the majority of mapping. Simply cast Frostbolt while you keep running. Clicking Frostbolt with a short delay between each cast allows you to maintain a high movement speed and ramp up more projectiles. Do not hold down Frostbolt, as that would cause you to move drastically slower. You can press more buttons when extra damage is needed. If you run into a tough elite that doesn't have any other surrounding enemies, cast Frostwall to allow Frostbolt to fork and explode, while also triggering multiple comets. The full skill rotation can be executed against map or pinnacle bosses that take time to spawn. Start off by casting Sigil of Power from a chiming staff equipped in weapon set 2. Sigil of Power grants 15% more spell damage per stage, up to a maximum of 4 stages. Then switch back to weapon set 1 and ramp up the damage buff by spending mana with conductivity spam. Conductivity is supported by Cursed Ground, so the boss will have lightning resistance reduced as soon as it spawns. Frost walls can also be prepped ahead of time. Fortress support allows Frostwall to surround the boss with more ice crystals. As soon as the boss's life bar finally appears, cast Frostbolt to start the chain reaction of explosions. Let's take a closer look at the debuffs applied to the boss. Conductivity supported by Cursed Ground and Hiding Curse is immediately applied to reduce the boss's lightning resistance by 49%. Frostwall is utilized for the rest of the debuffs. It's supported by both lightning and cold exposure, which starts at 20% reduction in resistances. Strip Away support and the Scouring Winds Ascendancy node enhance the debuff to reduce resistances by 52%. The lightning damage from Frostwall explosions applies shock, and the Strike Twice Ascendancy node allows it to stack twice. Shock causes the target to take increased damage from all sources, starting at a 20% value by default. Overcharge support and jewels with increased magnitude of shock double dip by enhancing both debuff applications. The maximum shock value for each debuff is 100%, so the boss can take up to 200% increased damage with enough shock magnitude. Finally, the cold portion of damage applies chill to slow the boss's actions by 25%. Critical hits trigger the comets, while additional frost walls can be cast. Let's cover the entire setup for the Frostbolt Comet Sorceress, starting with the skill gems. Frostbolt is the main skill cast for damage while clearing groups of enemies. All the support gems in this video will be listed in order of priority in case you don't have 5 sockets. Scattershot is important to fire 3 projectiles per cast. Ambush is needed to guarantee crits for more damage and rapid triggers of cast on critical comet. Considered casting, magnified effect, and acceleration improve the clear speed while mapping. Frostwall is cast on top of bosses and tough elites to explode frostbolts and trigger comets. Spell Cascade support provides Frostwall with enough area to cover an enemy. Lightning exposure, cold exposure, strip away, and overcharge debuff enemies so they take more damage. The lightning exposure might seem weird in a cold skill build, but it's utilized due to Archmage. Depending on your maximum mana, Archmage provides about 3 to 4 times the skill's base damage as extra lightning damage. Archmage doesn't need any supports, but you can slot Clarity if you have an extra 10 spirit to spare. You need 190 total spirit to turn on Archmage and cast on critical, or 200 if you include Clarity. The extra 90 to 100 spirit can be obtained from your body armor and amulet. Don't forget to use Gemcutter's Prism to add quality to cast on critical for 10% reduced reservation. Cast on critical triggers Comet. Spell Echo and Impetus increase the number of Comets. Inspiration is helpful since these triggers can completely drain your mana with the Frost Wall tech. Elemental Focus is the last support to increase damage. Connectivity is cast against bosses to reduce lightning resistance, and is supported by Hiding Curse for more effect, and Curse Ground to allow it to be precast before bosses spawn. Sigil of Power is also for boss fights to buff damage. The skill is unlocked by equipping a Chiming Staff in the second weapon set, and then supported by Persistence for more duration. To automate the weapon swapping, you can switch Frostbolt, Frostwall, and Connectivity to only be used with weapon set 1. Casting Sigil of Power swaps to the Chiming Staff in weapon set 2, and then casting any of the other skills swaps you back to weapon set 1. Blink is an optional spirit gem to traverse faster while clearing maps, supported by Ingenuity, Second Wind, Arcane Temple, and Unbreakable. If you want to utilize the weapon swap Blink tech, set Cast on Critical to only be used with weapon set 1, and activate Blink only for weapon set 2. You can then manually hit the weapon swap button to access Blink when needed. Stormweaver is chosen for the Ascendancy due to its mana sustain and damage increases. The first 2 Ascendancy trials completed unlock the Arcane Surge nodes, Constant Gale, and Force of Will. Arcane Surge will always be active, while the build's high maximum mana scales it for more cast speed and mana regen. The third Ascendancy points are allocated to obtain Strike twice, allowing Shock to be applied twice for more damage. Shock by default causes enemies to take 20% increased damage, and then Shock Magnitude is utilized to scale it higher for both applications of the debuff. The final Ascendancy unlocks Scouring Winds, which doubles the effect of the exposure applied by the support gems in Frostwall. This is the base setup of the skill tree that is obtainable at level 79. The most essential nodes are allocated, including Eldritch Battery to convert Energy Shield on gear to mana. Mind Over Matter is not allocated due to it cutting mana regen in half. Instead, damage taken from Mana Before Life nodes are utilized. 34% Mana Before Life is available from passive nodes, and Jewels can provide the rest to reach about 70%. Splitting damage between life and mana enables a higher amount of effective hit points. The split also makes recovery easier by allowing a life flask and 2k mana regen to restore damage taken. The bottom right of the tree is necessary for the third projectile when Frostbolt forks. You can skip some of the Jewel sockets if you don't yet have good Jewels to insert. The final essential nodes increase critical strike chance, the most worthwhile being Kill for Assassin and Controlling Magic. The reduced critical strike damage bonus doesn't matter since Maligaro's Virtuosity overrides it to always be 300%. Once you have the base skill tree done, additional skill points from leveling are allocated to improve clear speed. Increased area of effect nodes are obtained for bigger explosions from Frostbolt, Frostwall, and Comet. Finally, increased projectile speed allows Frostbolt to reach your enemies faster. This is my final skill tree at level 97. A total of 12 Jewel sockets are obtained in my final skill tree. The starter version of the build sockets rare jewels with a focus on 4% Mana Before Life affixes. Aim for about 36% of Mana Before Life from jewels to bring the total close to 70%. If you're on a lower budget, you can start with cheap jewels with 2 to 3% values and get by with about 50% total Mana Before Life. Next, you should acquire Critical Strike Chance to have at least 50% crit chance on Frostbolt. Spell Critical Strike Chance also works as both affixes do the same thing in this build. Other beneficial affixes include Magnitude of Shock or Ailments, Area of Effect, Elemental or Spell Damage, and Cast Speed. One affix of 2% mana on kill is enough to sustain mana during high density breaches. I currently have an Adorned Jeweler setup to boost 11 corrupted magic jewels. This is a more advanced version of the build due to its high investment cost. I recommend only using this setup if you can afford an Adorned with at least 75% increased effect. The 75% increased effect is a breakpoint that turns 4% mana before life affixes into 7%. If you have any less, like 74%, it gets rounded down to only provide 6%. The corrupted magic jewels have the same stat priority as the rare jeweler setup. I focused on enough mana before life to reach 69% total, and then critical strike chance. Magnitude of shock, area of effect, and cast speed are also helpful. Corrupted jewels can gain an extra resistance or attribute stat that is also increased in value by the Adorned Jeweler. The 1 affix of 2% mana on kill is included. Let's go over all the gear for the Frostbolt Comet Sorceress. The 2 key uniques were already covered in the mechanics section. Snakepit is equipped in the left ring slot for forking. Maligaro's Virtuosity sets critical damage bonus to 300%, so we don't have to worry about stacking it elsewhere. These items can be corrupted for additional benefits. My ring received some extra intelligence, and the gloves gained an extra socket. Before corrupting, make sure you apply Sibilant Catalyst to Snakepit to boost the cast speed and spell damage affixes. The other ring can be a rare item. Prioritize maximum mana and mana regen rate, as these stats are boosted by applying Neuro Catalyst. Maximum life is also a priority. Increased rarity can be gained in this slot, but first ensure that you can cap all your resistances. A breach ring-based type is preferred since it allows for a higher quality to mana modifiers. Ingenuity is an optional unique item to increase the bonuses gained from equipped rings. The benefits of Ingenuity are better in a setup with 2 rare rings, but it can still be worthwhile with the Snakepit equipped. I recommend only using Ingenuity in this build if it has at least 70% bonus. Otherwise, you can equip a rare belt with life, mana, and resistances. 90 additional spirit is required in the build and can be obtained from your body armor and amulet. 100 additional spirit will also allow you to activate Clarity for 30% increased mana regen. After getting the spirit affix on the amulet, prioritize 2 or 3 levels to spell skills, and then mana, mana regen, and life. Any item rarity, attribute, or resistance affixes are a bonus. The rare body armor is a major source of energy shield, which is converted to mana by Eldritch Battery. There are 2 different body armor based types that are worthwhile. The Expert Keth Raiment comes with a beneficial mana regen implicit. A total energy shield value in the 600s is considered good on this item base. The other option is an Expert Hexer's Robe. This base type doesn't have the extra mana regen stat, but has a higher starting energy shield value, so you can get 700 plus total energy shield. Try to also get some resistances on your body armor. The helmet stacks energy shield similar to the body armor. Maximum mana and resistances are also important stats on this item. The boots are harder to stack energy shield due to the need for a movement speed affix, so I prioritize maximum life here instead. The usual maximum mana and resistance affixes are also beneficial. For the weapons, I prefer a wand and focus setup for high damage. The wand should have levels of cold spell skills, spell damage, critical strike chance, mana, and mana regen. Remember that the damage output in this build is split between lightning and cold. Spell damage applies to both elements, so it's preferred over lightning or cold damage affixes. The focus can stack energy shield to about 300. Other beneficial affixes include level of all spell skills, critical strike chance, maximum mana, and mana regen. If you want more survivability, you can swap the focus to a shield that has around 40% block chance instead. This build's playstyle is fairly safe since it can deal damage from off screen, so I chose the focus as the default setup. The second weapon set has a chiming staff to unlock Sigil of Power. The chiming staff doesn't need to have really good stats since it's only used to cast Sigil of Power before swapping back to weapon set 1. Please enjoy the rest of the bonus gameplay footage. If you learned something new in this video, you owe it to me to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss out on my future content for Path of Exile 2. Until next time, peace out and happy slaying.
I can feel it.